We often imagine the Shaolin monks as born legends of war, yet their true origin story begins with a group of very frightened, vulnerable men. They were never meant to be the invincible warriors we see in movies, but rather individuals seeking a quiet escape from a very loud world. The golden robes and the fierce kicks came much later, after a long period of suffering that forced these men to change their very nature. If you think they started with strength, you are mistaken, because their journey actually began with a deep sense of helplessness and human fragility. To understand the dragon, we must first look at the person who was once afraid of his own shadow in a world filled with chaos. They did not choose the path of the sword because they loved violence, but because the world gave them no other way to survive. Every strike they eventually mastered was born from a prayer that went unanswered during the darkest times of their early history on the mountain. The myth of the superhuman monk often hides the reality of the desperate human being who was just trying to protect a small piece of peace. History has a way of painting over the fear with colors of glory, but the stones of the temple still remember the original cries. We are about to peel back the layers of legend to find the heartbeat of the real people who lived behind the famous temple walls. The ancient lands were once a fractured mosaic of warring states, where survival was a luxury that very few ordinary people could actually afford. When central authority collapsed, the roads became rivers of danger, and the villages were left to face the cruelty of lawless bandits and soldiers. People were looking for a deeper meaning to their suffering before they ever thought about picking up a weapon to defend their own lives. The philosophical soul of the nation was searching for an anchor in a storm that seemed like it would never truly come to an end. In this era of constant betrayal, the mountains offered the only sanctuary for those who wished to preserve their humanity and their spiritual dignity. Temples became the last outposts of civilization where art, poetry, and meditation were kept alive, while the rest of the world burned outside. It was a time when a man's word was worth nothing, but the silence of the mountain peaks was worth everything to a tired soul. The chaos of the plains forced the thinkers and the dreamers to look inward, because the outward world had become a place of nightmares. Suffering became the soil in which the seeds of a new kind of spiritual resilience were planted by those who refused to give up. This was the broken stage upon which the legend of the Shaolin would eventually be built, one stone and one prayer at a single time. Nestled in the heart of Henan province, the Zhongshan Mountains provided a natural fortress for those who sought a life of absolute spiritual seclusion. The year was 495, and the emperor granted this sacred land to a monk named Bado to spread the teachings of peace. Isolation was not just a choice for these early residents, but a spiritual necessity to keep the distractions of the material world far away. The architecture was designed to harmonize with the natural curves of the mountain, creating a space where the earth and the heavens could meet. In these early days, the sounds of the temple were limited to the chanting of sutras and the soft wind blowing through the pines. There was a profound sense of purpose in the way they moved, as if every step was a meditation on the nature of existence itself. The mountain was a harsh teacher, demanding physical endurance and a quiet mind from anyone who dared to live within its rocky, unforgiving embrace. They built their walls not to keep people out, but to create a container where the human spirit could finally be observed without any interference. Every stone laid in those foundations was a testament to the belief that peace requires a very solid and very dedicated physical home. Little did they know that this quiet sanctuary would one day become the most famous center for martial excellence in the entire known world. When Bodhidharma arrived from the West, he brought a version of Buddhism that prioritized direct experience over the endless reading of dusty old books. The Chinese scholars were used to complex rituals, but this new master taught that enlightenment could be found in the silence of a cave. Legend says he sat facing a wall for 9 years, proving that the greatest battles a human can fight are always within their mind. This shift toward the physical body as a vessel for the spirit was the revolutionary spark that would eventually give birth to their movement. The monks realized that a weak body could not support a strong mind, especially when the environment around them was so physically demanding. They began to observe the movements of animals in the forest, seeing the wisdom in how a tiger strikes or a crane balances. Sitting still was no longer enough. They needed a way to keep their blood flowing and their spirits sharp during the long hours of meditation. The clash between the Indian roots of Buddhism and the practical Chinese spirit created a unique philosophy that valued both stillness and explosive action. Bodhidharma's arrival marked the end of the temple as a purely academic place and the beginning of its life as a laboratory for the soul. The path to heaven now required a bridge made of bone and muscle, transforming the very definition of what it meant to be spiritual. The turning point came when the temple was no longer ignored by the bandits who roamed the mountains looking for easy targets to rob. A peaceful man faces a terrible dilemma when he sees those he loves being threatened by the mindless violence of the outside world. The monks had to ask themselves if it was more holy to let the temple be destroyed or to pick up a staff. They chose to defend, but they did so with a vow that their combat must always be free from the poison of personal hatred. A Shaolin warrior does not strike to kill the person, but to stop the violence that the person is trying to inflict upon the world. This transition from prayer to protection was a radical evolution that forced the monks to master the mechanics of the human body in battle. They transformed their daily chores, like carrying water and chopping wood, into foundational exercises that built the strength they needed for their new roles. The temple became a fortress of discipline, where the boundary between a spiritual ritual and a combat drill began to fade away completely. They realized that the ultimate form of compassion is sometimes the strength required to stand in the way of a person who intends harm. The peaceful monk had become a guardian, proving that a heart full of love can still carry a hand that is capable of iron. Training in the Shaolin Temple is not about learning how to fight, but about destroying the ego that makes a person weak and lazy. The discipline begins at 4 in the morning when the air is freezing and the muscles are screaming for just a few more minutes. Repetition is the hammer that shapes the soul, as they perform the same movement thousands of times until the mind no longer has to think. Pain is treated as a guest that teaches you where your limits are, and more importantly, how you can move past those limits forever. They condition their hands by striking buckets of sand and gravel until the skin becomes like leather, and the bones become as hard as steel. True Shaolin mastery is not found in the strength of the muscle, but in the absolute control of the breath during moments of extreme physical stress. The training creates a body that can endure what would break an ordinary person, because the mind has already accepted the reality of the struggle. Every drop of sweat that falls on the temple floor is considered an offering to the ancestors who walked this difficult path before them. This is the stage where the viewers truly see the price of greatness, which is paid in hours of silence and years of lonely effort. By the time a monk is ready to leave the temple, he is no longer the person who entered, for his old self has vanished. Movies have taught us that Shaolin monks can fly through the air and defy the laws of gravity with almost no effort at all. The reality is far more impressive because it involves the mastery of physics and the incredible power of a focused human nervous system. They do not use magic to break stones. They use the perfect alignment of their weight and the explosive release of energy from their core. The iron head, or iron shirt, techniques are results of decades of gradual conditioning that thickens the tissues and strengthens the bone density of the body. While the legends talk about supernatural powers, the monks themselves speak about the simple, boring consistency of doing the work every single day. We love the fantasy of the invincible hero, but the real hero is the man who manages to stay calm while his body is failing. A Shaolin monk can be defeated in a fight, but he cannot be broken in his spirit, which is the true secret of their legendary status. The extraordinary feats we see on television are just the visible peak of a very large mountain of hidden mental and spiritual preparation. When you remove the cinematic special effects, you are left with something even more beautiful, the full potential of the human animal in action. The truth is that they are not gods or magicians, but ordinary people who decided to never stop pushing against the walls of the impossible. Throughout history, any group that possesses its own power and discipline has always been viewed with a mixture of respect and deep suspicion. The monks often helped emperors secure their thrones, using their legendary skills to turn the tide of battles that seemed lost to the enemy. However, that same strength made the government nervous, because a monk who does not fear death is a man who cannot be easily controlled. The temple was burned to the ground several times by rulers who wanted to erase the influence of the Shaolin from the hearts of the people. During these times of persecution, the monks became wanderers, carrying their knowledge in their bodies because their books had all been turned into ash. The survival of the Shaolin tradition is a miracle of human persistence, as it managed to live through dynasties, revolutions, and modern political shifts. They learned to navigate the dangerous waters of politics by being useful enough to be protected, but humble enough to not seem like a threat. The tension between spiritual independence and state authority is a theme that repeats itself in every century of the Shaolin's long and bloody history. It is a reminder that true power always attracts both the praise of the weak and the jealousy of the powerful who want to own it. Even today, the temple must balance its ancient traditions with the requirements of a modern world that views everything through the lens of utility. In the modern era, the Shaolin Temple has become a global brand, attracting millions of tourists and students from every corner of the planet. You can find Shaolin schools in London, New York, and Berlin, where the ancient forms are taught to people looking for a way to de-stress. Some critics argue that the commercialization of the temple has killed the original spirit of Bodhidharma, turning a sacred path into a mere show. But if you look past the bright stage lights and the tourist groups, you can still find the quiet corners where the real training continues. The soul of Shaolin is not found in the ticket sales, but in the heart of the student who is willing to sweat in the dark. We must wonder if the ancient wisdom can survive the transition into a digital world where attention spans are short and comfort is the goal. Perhaps the external change is just another layer of the mountain that the monks must learn to climb in order to preserve their inner peace. The true test of the Shaolin today is whether they can remain in the world but not of it, as they have always tried to be. As long as there is one person seeking to master themselves, the light that started in that mountain cave will never truly go out completely. History is still being written, and the Shaolin are simply entering a new chapter where the enemy is no longer a bandit, but a distraction. True power has never been about how hard you can hit another person, but about how much control you have over your own impulses. The greatest victory a warrior can achieve is the one where the sword never has to leave its scabbard, because the mind is at peace. We travel across time and space to realize that the human struggle for balance is a universal story that never truly loses its relevance. The Shaolin reminds us that we are all capable of transforming our fear into a form of beauty if we are disciplined enough to try. It is easy to be angry, but it takes a legendary strength to remain kind when the world around you is being cruel and unfair. The mountain does not move because the wind blows. It stays rooted in its own nature, and that is exactly how we should live our lives. Your body is the temple, and your thoughts are the monks. If you do not train them, they will eventually burn the whole place down. The legacy of the Shaolin is not a series of fighting moves, but a map that shows us how to find our way back to ourselves. In the end, we are all just travelers looking for a sanctuary where we can finally stop running and start understanding who we really are. Strength is knowing that you could strike, and choosing instead to offer a hand of peace to a person who expects a clenched fist. If these stories of ancient wisdom and human resilience have touched your soul today, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell for more journeys. Your support through likes and shares helps us keep these historical mysteries alive and allows us to reach more people who are seeking the truth. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so please share this video with anyone who needs a reminder of their inner strength.